Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack Farmer, and this is the Evolution of Movies show. But I am not alone. I am joined by two men. They're my own personal spy versus spy comic. It's James Shippey and Andy Rossi. Guys, how are you today?
I'm doing well, feeling good, Jack. James, great to see you both.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. It's for listeners and viewers, it's on the earlier side for recording this. You guys have no idea what we do to get these shows up on time. It's funny. It's early for us. I'm sure for most people it's not really that early, but for us it's very early. It's 7 in the a.m. for those wondering, which for us is very early. We're all night folks here, but thank you guys for joining the show. Let's talk about how the show works real quick. What we do is we watch movies and then we talk about them, break them down, give our opinions, our thoughts, our analysis. And we call it the evolution of movies because we don't just watch movies willy-nilly. No, what we do is we always watch a movie that came out 1 year after the last movie we watched. So we start in 1990, move to 1991, then 1992. Now we're on 2001, and that means next week we go to 2002. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're here at the here and now, 2001, a time when movies were all about the dark and gritty side of law enforcement with hits like Training Day and Mulholland Drive and, of course, Super Troopers. But we're not talking about any of those. We're watching Spy Game, a movie that Roger Ebert called a slick artifact made of quick cutting and the kind of rough glamour you find in fashion ads. And IMDb describes as a retiring CIA agent, Nathan Muir, recalls his training of Tom Bishop while working against agency politics to free him from his Chinese captors. James, going into this, what were you thinking about this movie? Had you seen it before, and how did that impact you watching it this time around?
Yeah, well, Jack, I must say I've never seen Spy Game. I don't think of that movie for my demographic. That's how to start the sentence off. But it's not bad. It's kind of like the type of movie that you watch with your dad on a Sunday afternoon.
That's so good.
And he's like, son, this is a good movie. That good old Robert Redford. I remember back in the day, the sentence starts like that. Yeah. And Brad Pitt is the kind of current version of Robert Redford. So I thought it was a pretty good movie. It was a nice surprise.
But you described that so well because you're right. If I shut my eyes and think about it, I can imagine the TNT logo on the bottom of the screen or like the AMC logo or whatever, because you wouldn't watch it with your dad intentionally. You're flipping through the channels and it's on, and then you just finish it.
Exactly.
But Andy, there were two hunks in this movie, so you must have loved it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, wow. Yeah, I think I agree with James too about watching it with your dad. It seemed like one of those movies kind of similar to that, where if I was at like a hotel for the weekend and you only get the certain channels, your TNTs and TBSs, that I'd be going to bed and that would be on, and it'd be one of those movies I'd stick around for, even though there'd be some commercials going on. I'd have to like figure out a way to be like, hold on, we don't need to leave the hotel room quite yet. Let me finish this. Let me finish these hunks. And like you said, it was great to see both of them together, because I think Brad Pitt, when he first kind of came into our lives, probably around Thelma and Louise, and then for me it was Legends of the Fall. Wow. I just had to take a moment there. But I think he was always compared to looks wise to Robert Redford. So I think it was just about time that they were in a movie together.
Two handsome fellas.
Yeah.
I saw this movie when it came out in theaters, and I hadn't really seen or really heard of it since then. So it was interesting. I remember walking out of it in theaters thinking that was a cool movie, but then immediately after I forgot it ever existed, and that I would have never even thought of it again if not for this show, looking through different years and then pulling up 2001 and seeing what came out. And I thought, oh yeah, that movie, I forgot all about it. And that's an interesting thing to me. So that's why I wanted to revisit again. And it was interesting watching it again. I could kind of see why that happened, because watching it, I did enjoy it, but now I have thoughts on why it was so forgettable. and that comes at the end. So we'll talk about that at the end. That's called a tease, ladies and gentlemen, by the way. We're foreshadowing. I'm going to tell you why I thought it was a forgettable movie at the end, but I thought in the experience of watching it was actually pretty fun. But yeah, I still feel like I could forget it again in a few weeks.
Yeah, it was one of those movies where I would maybe forget that I've seen it before. Like I don't know if I've seen it. I might have. Nothing seemed like. I'm sure I did because it was Brad. I can't believe we've gone this long without a Brad Pitt movie. But yeah, watching it, I go, I don't know. I may have seen it. I may not have seen it.
Right. Yeah, it was an easy watch movie. I think I put it under the easy watch. As you said, if it's on in a hotel, you might catch it either in the first or second act. It's good. It's kind of like a by the numbers espionage film with a couple of interesting twists, but we'll talk about that because there's some interesting stuff going on with the intelligence agency here. Not a lot of intelligence at the intelligence agency.
Right.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that.
For whether or not people remember watching this movie, I want to thank everyone who remembers to watch us week in and week out and listen to our shows. You guys are very appreciated. If you could do us a big favor, leave a comment, leave a like, a subscribe, hit us with a 5-star review. Let us know what you think about the show. And in fact, when you do, tell us what movies you would like us to cover, because it'd be fun to see what listener response is on what movies coming up for what years you would like to see us chat about. But guys, are you two assets ready to help me get this show on the road?
And I'll gladly be either Muir or Bishop.
Emphasis on ass.
Yes.
Thank you, Jack. I mean, right.
I know what you fellas are working with. Come on. We start in April of 1991 at Soochow Prison, and the response to a cholera outbreak. Brad Pitt is in a white lab coat and takes a pill before giving everyone else presumably a vaccine. Then, after putting some gunk on his hand, takes an electric shock that knocks him out. And with a hidden injection, he appears to be dead. But now, like the end of Romeo and Juliet, he's just alive and pretending to be dead. Spoiler alert. They were pretending to be dead in Romeo and Juliet. In any case, the electric shock takes out the security cameras, and now Pitt is sneaking through the prison, giving gum to tortured souls and saving a prisoner, sneaking out on a magician's gurney. But the guy he gave the gum to, he blows more than a bubble as Pitt's cover is blown, and he's now himself a prisoner. James, this is our first look into the world. Explain so far, kind of, it's very quick, obviously, but what kind of world we're living here in Spy Game.
Well, like I said, when you see Brad Pitt entering the prison, and he's got the doctor garb on, he's undercover, obviously. But I mean, at this point in the film, you're just trying to figure out what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of quick cuts, and it moves us at a really fast pace. And I think we get this, inciting incident. I mean, this all happens within like 5 to 10 minutes. So this movie moves at a very brisk pace. That's the thing I do remember about that opening. And I like that because, I was looking at my watch at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're always looking at your watch.
I'm always looking at the watch that's not on my hand. That's the whole point. It's not even a watch here.
But something to, we see these guys. Not only is Brad Pitt a spy, but he's a very capable spy, it seems, and a very connected spy with the small radios he has in his ears, the ability to take out the cameras and the gurneys and all this other stuff. James had mentioned the quick cuts and things like that. I thought that this had a very gritty feel to it that seemed popular at the time, especially Brad Pitt movies like Fight Club and 12 Monkeys, like when he was getting drugged through the hallways and things like that. The way this was filmed and this opening scene, tell me about your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you guys are saying with the fast pacing. I'm like, man, this reminds me of Enemy of the State. And then I found out this is a Tony Scott film. I didn't know that. I love Tony Scott, Enemy of the State, Top Gun, Domino, a lot of Denzel movies. Unfortunately, Tony Scott is not with us anymore, but he made some great movies, True Romance. But it definitely, like most of his movies, have that fast pacing. And I did have a question. In the beginning, did they tell us what year it was? Did I maybe not see that on the screen? Because I was kind of confused. What did it say? 80s?
It said, 91 is when the
91.
movie takes place, which and sorry to jump in. Maybe you say this. I kept getting confused because I kept thinking it was a 2001 movie, but it was a 91 movie made in 2001, which was a very weird.
Yeah, I got a little thrown off, and it was probably my own mistake not seeing that. But like when they did the flashbacks later, I was kind of like, "Wait, how far back is this?" Like I was a little thrown off with the what time period.
Well, same here because it's like Brad Pitt. I mean, this guy is very good looking, but I mean, really, like he still looks like that 30 years later,
right?
Or 20 or so years later,
right?
It's, on the flashbacks, you're going back to like Vietnam time period.
Yeah,
but yeah, I was a little lost on the timeline too. I'm wondering how many viewers were confused by that.
Yeah, because it was so like you said, like the fast cuts, and it was very like for the time period, very hip. It was like very cool, all the stuff they were doing in the beginning. So I was kind of like a little thrown off. I'm like, oh wait, this is the past. And then the guy with the gum, I thought maybe that would be explained to me a little bit later. They do mention gum later, but why did he give that guy gum? Do we know?
Just to pacify him, I think, because he was like freaking out, and so he was trying to get him to be quiet. So he gave him the gum.
Did you see that?
I'm a friend.
He was enjoying that bubble.
Did you see that guy's grill? Did you see his teeth?
He was not eating sugar-free gum.
Yeah.
But from that little like lackluster piece of gum that looked like a big red, he had some huge bubbles. I mean, usually you need some like bubblicious. I don't know.
When you're in a Chinese prison, you don't get much gum, and so when you do get it, you make the best of it. And you're gonna blow some pretty intense bubbles.
And he did.
And apparently that gives away Tom Bishop's position. This guy blowing bubbles, which I still don't get. I mean, I don't know why. It's funny they would lock down the prison when this guy's blowing the bubbles, right? I know we're getting a little head.
Well, that was the the bubble was simply because he what it did is the warden basically said, wait, the power went out. Now this guy has gum. How did a prisoner get gum? Someone was here. Something's wrong. Don't let anybody out. I think he just kind of put 2 and 2 together that something's off. It seems odd that there's this truck leaving with a body on it while this just happened. And so I
did like that.
He basically just outsmarted him, I think.
I did like the way they shot that though. Like you kind of were like, is Pitt going to escape? Is he? He's going back and forth. Like you go back and forth to like the surveillance footage, and then he did not escape.
Yeah, it was an intense movie or an intense scene. And just one last thing on the time that I just wanted to add, even though I know it was a 2001 movie and I know it was taking place in 1991, it did still feel weird when they did the Vietnam thing. I was like, geez, these guys are old.
Yeah. That's why I was so thrown off.
Let's continue on. In Washington, D.C., Robert Redford is getting a wake-up call from a jerk that says he needs to get into work right away. It's Redford's last day, of course, because that's how it always is in these movies. And he now knows that Brad Pitt is in a Chinese prison. So some dude at the agency wants info on Pitt, but Redford isn't passing it along, and he's already putting aside his retirement plans, handing off all of his files to his secretary to burn when notified. He tells his colleagues he doesn't have the files, so they invite him into a need-to-know meeting under the premise that Redford has the files memorized. They have 24 hours to either save Pitt, claiming him as a spy, or he'll be executed. It's a delicate situation, and Redford and the CIA are already negotiating what information they're willing to share with each other on the matter. We go to Vietnam when Redford explains when they met originally, when he first met Brad Pitt. And he said that he needed a sniper, but he can't get who he wants, but he can get Pitt, who we see living separately from the rest of the guys. And that's important because we see that he's a guy that he's with the guy that he left in the ambulance. And we also see that he's kind of living with the people and making himself part of the Vietnam folks. Redford and Pitt had a back and forth, and while they don't charm the pants off each other, they agree to work together. They take the mission, complete it, and even when things go bad and even shoot down a helicopter Call of Duty style, it doesn't go perfect, but they get the job done. James, this chunk of the movie is to show us how smart Redford is and also how field capable Brad Pitt is.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know what they did is they did something different with the farm, right? Because the thing I remember from the trailers of this movie is not what the movie is, so to speak. It's told in a lot of flashbacks. And I remember when they first started using that form, I'm like, I don't know if I was going to feel that, but it actually works very well overall. The flashbacks is like where you get like the heart of the story. Especially like in the second act with Brad Pitt. But yeah, I mean, we're getting introduced to him and the sniper scene, which I think that's probably the first time in a movie where I was like, this is a great suspenseful, it was like 5-7 minutes of like suspense when, he's ready to, shoot the target, but they can't hear him. And then, a helicopter shows up and you're thinking, okay, come on, they got to get out of this because the helicopter's coming for them. And let's just say this helicopter is supposed to have all these guns, all this weaponry, but then Brad Pitt's taking him out with like a rifle, like he's that good,
Yeah.
Maybe they were blinded by his hotness. I don't know.
His hair too. His hair was amazing in the flashback.
Yeah. Oh yeah, hair was just great. But I thought it was a great level of suspense. And the good thing I like with Robert Redford's character, when he's going through the office and meeting all the other like suits, he's learning what's going on almost at the same pace we are. So we really are like, feel like we're in it with him. And when they're like, when it comes to all the information he wants, they're like, oh, well, we're only going to share with you what you need to know. I was like, okay, I know what kind of movie this is. So it's all about Robert Redford figuring stuff out, which is really kind of the fun part. The through line of the film is like him always figuring things out and trying to outsmart the other intelligence officers. So I thought that was pretty cool.
It's an interesting point because you're right. You're figuring things out with Redford, and it's very subtle and very clever how the movie basically says Redford is very smart, he's very observant, and he's smarter than everyone else. So you figure things out with him, and as a viewer, you also feel smart because you're like, oh, Redford and I are both figuring this out. We're both intelligent like Redford is. At least that's how I feel. I'm like, I'm figuring this out just like he is. I'm so incredible. Andy, James alluded to there's kind of a current timeline, which is in the CIA, but then the flashbacks telling the story along the way, sort of like Slumdog Millionaire. Are you a fan of that sort of storytelling?
Yeah, I think it's great. As long as you're kind of like showing both back and forth, almost like we talked about with the Tony Scott, like quick cuts and stuff. I don't think you could stay at the flashback too long because then you'll lose what's going on in the present. And I think they do a really good job with that. And I do like in the present, Redford's car, he's got like this sick like Porsche. I'm like, that's perfect. I mean, he's like flying there. They give him like a certain time he needs to be there. I love his character right from the beginning. I was on board with him. The thing I was a little confused about though, because they said it's his last day and he's getting this call, he's trying to sleep in. But I was wondering, because when he gets there, it's like a full house. Like there's a ton of people working. So on his last day, did he just plan on like sleeping in and coming in late? What was his plan?
What were they going to do? Fire him? Sure. Show up whenever you want. Yeah, it's a good point. Because everyone else was there. So why wasn't he there? Especially since he seemed like someone who was important. I mean, he had a 2-room office and a secretary.
He did. His secretary was great too. Yeah,
the MVP of the whole team.
Oh, for sure.
Way more important than Brad Pitt was to that crew. But we have
true.
Back in the need to know room, the CIA is making it feel like something deeper is going on. They throw around the word assassin while Redford is talking to his secretary who says people are digging through his files. So he pretends he knows where the files are so he can go back to the office and get rid of them. That's when he tells the secretary to burn the files and lets her and us, the viewer, know that the CIA is looking for a reason to let Pitt die, just so that they can pursue their capitalism. They figure out that Redford knows what's going on. The CIA figures out what Redford knows is going on, while Redford uses someone else's office to tell the press what's going on. Back in the need to know room, now he's talking about recruiting Pitt to the CIA. That takes us back in time to Germany, where Pitt is isolated. So when Redford recruits him, Pitt's excited about it. Redford invites Pitt over for Christmas, and he closes the deal there. They start training, and it's all about lying and persuading and observing and not about guns. And there's lots of cool stuff here that I'm sure we're going to talk about. But it ends with the line, put some money away to retire somewhere warm and never risk your life or your career for an asset. Kind of a foreshadowing there. Andy, we're seeing just how good these guys are at being spies during this training session.
Yeah, I love it. I think that scene with the balcony just makes me laugh. You know, when he's like, what does he say? Redford says to Pitt, he says like, I want to see you up in that balcony or something like that in like a certain amount of time.
In 5 minutes.
And I thought for sure they were going to do, oh, Pitt's going to seduce some, nice lady. But he cuts up and it's like this old, like nice man. And they're like having like tea together, or coffee, whatever that is. I could have gone for more of that, to be honest with you. I think that's what I wanted throughout the whole movie. And I think we did get a lot of it, is just that Pitt and Redford interaction. When this movie first came out, I kind of assumed that they were father and son. And I was really hoping that that's what it was. It wasn't. However, I think there definitely is like a little father-son kind of relationship. And I think during that recruitment kind of training scene, you kind of see that.
It's interesting. When I remember this movie, that's what I remember, is him training him how to be a spy. And I agree with you. I think that this is what I wish the whole movie was him training him to be a spy.
Yeah.
Because there were so many cool things that they were talking about too. Like, I love the little bit about, I was like, you told that woman 4 lies. You told that woman 4 lies that now have to be true, which was just interesting. How, like, basically, look, if you're going to lie, you have to commit to the lie. You can't just say things willy-nilly. And I think those were all very cool things I would have liked to have seen more. I also think you make a good point about, I want to see a father-son spy movie where they're like, I never wanted to be a spy, Dad. This was your dream.
That would be great.
I don't want to go to Dartmouth, Dad.
Dad.
James, I thought this is
starring Martin and Charlie Sheen.
I never wanted to be a multi-millionaire movie star, Dad.
This
was your dream.
This was your dream. I wanted to make pots for a living.
Yeah. I wanted to do drywall.
No one says that. So, James, though, this is where the movie gets fun. And now this is sort of where we're seeing just how much of what's going on is really an illusion. And what we have to start asking ourselves, knowing just how good these guys are at manipulating what is perceived, we have to start asking ourselves as viewers, what are we seeing that's being manipulated?
Yeah, I mean, as you guys were saying, the training montage is a personal favorite. That's when I really kind of got the whole Tony Scott stuff, because I don't know about you guys, but I believe a lot of stuff with Tony Scott's later films like this, Deja Vu, they almost played like very slick CSI episodes, right? I don't know if you ever got this. I always got this feeling like his movies were almost like long, like crime drama, espionage type films, but they were almost like TV shows. The way it's very formulaic, but it works every time. With all the stock characters. But yeah, I like that, and I agree. I wish we could have gotten more of that, because up to that point, I finally realized, as I keep going back to the trailer, when you see the trailer of the film, and I could see how some people, when they saw this movie, may not have been pleased with it, because they may have went in with one kind of thought of what they were going to see, but you don't even get a lot of Pitt in the first 30, 40 or whatever minutes.
Oh, I realized this.
Yeah, I'm sure Andy realized this, right? And any woman that went with her boyfriend or husband to the theater to see this is like, well, wait a second. I came to see Brad Pitt.
Well, it depends on the age of the couple, because they might have been there to see Redford.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, if they were like 50 or 60 and up, their wife was there for Redford.
Yeah.
But and it's really Redford's story, because like I said, it's really, as we'll see near the end of the film, he's the character that arcs the most because of the way he looks at the job, right? And not at the nuance of it. And Brad Pitt is someone who gets disaffected by all this espionage spy work, because he feels things. It's not just a job to him, and all the assets, he actually cares about them, and he sees them become expendable at certain times. So he has to grapple with that. But I would say during that training montage, that stuff is great. It's quick cuts. The music's great. It's just really popping, has this energy to it. And then as we see like their whole thing, I can't remember what country it was Germany, right? Or
Germany, yeah.
Okay, like that kind of first big grift or whatever that they're doing. And I don't know if we got to that part yet, but the whole thing with the gentleman.
Well, yeah, Yeah,
Yeah.
let's lead into that.
Yeah.
Where in Germany, Redford is working a room, and Pitt is out in the field getting someone out of one side of Germany and into the other. And Redford tells Pitt to throw out the bottle because the bad guys know what's going on. Pitt's able to barf his way out of a situation with some cops, but eventually has to throw the guy out into the road and leaves him for dead. But atop a building the next day, Redford is pissed that Pitt hesitated because guess what? The whole escape plan was just to woo the woman at the party anyways. Redford says that the guy trying to get across the border was just a baseball card to be traded, and Pitt questions whether or not he should stay with the CIA, but he does anyways, and Redford says, if you ever go against orders again and get caught, I will not come back for you. Again, another big foreshadow. Back at the Need to Know room in 1991, the woman that Redford wooed, where we learn later, was beaten to death 2 months after that situation. The CIA is bringing this up, and Redford finally asks, "Why are you trying to burn Brad Pitt?" They turn off the mics and they admit that they bugged China. Jealousy. No, seriously.
China.
I mean, I've seen. Did you see the guys in that room? I don't blame them. But they turn off the mics because they admit that they were bugging China, and if they admit that there was a spy over there, then China may find out that happened. But Pitt wasn't even on that mission, and they now have only 12 hours left to figure out what to do. Redford is wondering who Pitt was trying to save in the prison. Andy, how do these guys make all this out-of-date hair and fashion still look so cool?
Yeah, I mean, Pitt's hair was ridiculous. It reminded me of you remember Richard Marx? He was like an old 80s singer. There was almost like a mullety kind of thing going on. One thing I did want to mention that I really liked, I don't know why, it was just so, for lack of a better word, it was like a cute scene, is Redford pretending to talk to his wife in the present day.
Yeah,
I think we find out that he says he's on his fourth wife or something, and then we find out later, that it's not necessarily true. I don't know why. I was just like, you got a room full of guys they're all in the CIA, right? And it's just like they all fall for that, like him being like, "Okay, honey, I'll be there soon," or whatever it is. I don't know.
Right.
I just thought that because he does that. He does that twice, right? Yeah.
He makes 2 calls. That's right. It's a go.
Okay. Yeah, these are not very good. These are not very good spy catchers. They're not very smart. They're not very good about understanding lies for guys who are very high ranking in a lie-based profession.
Yeah. There's that guy. Sorry, real quick. That guy. I think his character's name is Harker. He's kind of like almost like our main villain in that room.
Yeah.
He was great. Like,
he is. When
he first, the very beginning, he's in with Redford talking to him, and I'm like, this guy's a good villain. Like, I just had a feeling he was going to be a villain, and he does great in this. By the way, he's so unlikable, and
what a scumbag that Harker is. He's like a typical suit. He was really good. He was really good in that role.
I was surprised we didn't see more of him in later movies. James, you were in the middle of a point before we moved on to add this part to the rundown. Tell us about this scene and what you thought kind of through this part of the movie.
Well, let's not forget the scene, because Andy mentioned when they're on the rooftop and they're talking, and he's like, he's talking about what's the right thing, and if you do this again, I'm gonna leave you back. Brad Pitt tosses a chair off of a roof. Okay, first of all, I don't know how high that chair's up, but look, man, I lived in New York for a few years. There's a chance that chair landed on someone and ended them, and we need to talk about that, okay? Because there's
I thought about that too.
But the irony of him doing that while talking about how you can't just treat people like baseball cards and that they're real people.
Yeah.
As he risks some maybe life by throwing that just randomly, not caring about what lives may be down there on the street.
Yeah, the thing at this point, because then when we go back from the flash forwards and the flashbacks and the present, Robert Redford, the way he's figuring stuff out, he's like duping these doofusy Central Intelligence Agency guys. These guys all went to the same academy and had to do the same training. But it'll be simple stuff like he'll see a file and he'll be like, "Oh, well, what's this?" And they're like, "How did you know that?"
Right.
It's just like right there on the table.
Yeah, it couldn't because you're just looking at the paper that's right in front of me with the name written at the top of it very big.
Exactly. So, like I said earlier, it doesn't seem to be a lot of intelligence at this intelligence agency.
Yeah.
He's just really outsmarting all of them, and that's fine. He's our protagonist, but it just seems a little funny that they're easily displayed throughout this movie.
Yeah.
There are a few that, to your point, too, almost feel like they're playing doofuses. Like they're not, like they're trying to be stupid. You know what I mean? Like because there's characters that they get outsmarted, and there's characters that they're supposed to be sort of dumb. And some of them almost feel like they're acting as if they are a dumb character. When if you're in this room, if you're in this boardroom during this kind of thing, it wasn't like day one people were in there. It wasn't like people who were in the middle of training were in there. They were all very high-ranking people. I mean, Robert Redford got a personal letter from the director of the CIA. So these guys are supposed to be intelligent. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting that he's getting away so often with such silly shenanigans.
Yeah.
But I think the real kind of crux of this part of the story is that when you're a spy, it's not always easy. It's not always just wooing girls and getting wins. Sometimes you do things that make you feel a little dirty, make you feel a little bad. It's not a good feeling to do the job sometimes. And to Robert Redford's point, and he'll make it again down the road in the movie, they technically got the win, even though they threw that guy out in the street to die. They technically got what they wanted. It technically went according to plan.
True. And I just want to piggyback on what you said, Jack. And I think that's what makes this kind of more of a guys said, like watching this with your dad. If you go to a movie like this in a theater, because you see Brad Pitt and you see Robert Redford and you might see some gunplay, you're thinking this may be an action-packed movie. But this movie, a lot of the suspense, especially for Robert Redford's character, comes in a boardroom. So it's not exactly what you think. It's kind of a thinking man's movie to a certain extent, right? You're seeing not all the glamorous stuff as much. You don't even see that much glamour. Even when Brad Pitt is wooing like his love interest, it's not even in a glamorous setting, as we'll talk about later. So I thought that was an interesting kind of different spy film. It's not a sexy spy movie, so to speak.
Yeah. I was kind of expecting more of like a Mission Impossible kind of vibe going on. And it was actually nice to not have that, because it's nice to have like a separate, like, oh, okay, they're doing their own thing. They're not trying to do Mission Impossible.
Yeah, they did love that rotating camera shot on the top of the building, though.
That's true.
They were all about that. I feel like I was about to get dizzy watching that scene. They were going around that rooftop like crazy.
Completely unnecessary shot. It's because, like I said, really, there's one table set up on this roof. They could have met at a coffee shop. They could have met at a park somewhere.
That felt very comic book, that they would be meeting on a rooftop on a fold out table with fold out chairs. To your point, they could have just met in their hotel room
at a Denny's.
Which they do later, so clearly they're okay with it, but not as dramatic, I guess. But as we move on, the news is now reporting the news that Robert Redford leaked, and now everyone knows what's going on with Brad Pitt in China. The Need to Know Room wants to know if Redford had anything to do with it, but he kind of gets away from all that. Assuming that this means the U.S. now has to claim Brad Pitt as a spy, Redford gets ready to finally call it a career. But before leaving, Redford sees the news on again, and wait for it, fake news. Redford is back on the case as he tries to get an image analysis of the prison and getting some info on Commander Wiley near the prison from some sucker before the villain agent forces Redford back into the Need to Know room, where Redford admits he knows that Pitt was after Elizabeth Hadley. Who is Elizabeth Hadley? Well, let me take you back to Beirut, 1985. They need to kill a dude and make it look like it was a natural accident. Pitt goes undercover as a photojournalist doing some kind of medical delivery deal to get closer to the target's doctor. And he even got published in the Times. Maybe he should have been a photojournalist instead of a spy. He finally gets to the location of where the target will be. So they get breakfast, and Pitt says he figured out Redford's birthday, which is both impressive and sweet. Redford can tell Pitt likes the woman he's using to get the location of the target from, but whatever, it's time for work. But Redford, going to work the way Redford does, reveals that Hadley may be using Pitt instead, and everything is topsy-turvy. It turns out she bombed the place, and when she eventually leaves Pitt, because he won't use his real name, we see that alliances are broken, people can't be trusted. Andy, at this point in the movie, who do you trust, Redford, Pitt, or Hadley?
Yeah, surprisingly, I was or not surprisingly, never mind. That's not surprising at all. Surprisingly, I was on Brad Pitt's side. I don't know.
You're always on Brad Pitt's side.
Yeah, this is true.
You can start every sentence.
Anyone who can make a mullet like look sexy, come on, what do you do? I feel like they were trying to make him look silly, and he was like, but he's still pulling it off somehow.
He's the coolest looking photojournalist ever. I just had to put that out. It almost makes you wish you were a photojournalist.
He did make it look so cool.
It made me want to buy a Padres hat because he's like wearing like a Padres hat. I'm like, that's kind of a cool hat.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're kind of like, you're almost wondering, like, is Redford kind of like not a scumbag, but like it's just like how he's so like almost by the book and like try to train him to do these things. Brad Pitt's got more of the heart, and you see that where he gives him the birthday gift. I really like that scene. That's such a great scene between them two. But the thing I was wondering too is, like, all the while we're seeing these flashbacks, all the while we're seeing Redford in the office, like, is Brad Pitt getting tortured this whole time? Mm-hmm. Like, I was kind of just thinking, I'm like, man, they got to work a little faster. He's getting tortured this whole time, especially when you see in the flashback and you're like, man, they had this nice relationship. All the while he's getting a beat down right now.
Right. And he took a long time to tell some of his stories too. Like, it felt like Robert Redford could have wrapped things. For a guy who likes to keep a lot of secrets, he sure does love to talk and tell stories, doesn't he? This is one of those things where I'm thinking, especially because so much of the movie is about how you get people to trust you and you use them. At this point, I was thinking, is Redford just using Brad Pitt, or is he using Hadley? Or is Brad Pitt using Redford and Hadley, or is Hadley using them both? And that's kind of the beauty of these kind of movies. James, how do you feel about these relationships? And were you worried that this was going to turn into a love story at this point?
You know, I was wondering how deep they were going to go with Tom Bishop and Elizabeth Hadley. And I get it. I don't think there was too much time spent with those two characters for it to be like, oh my gosh, like they have to be together, and what's this? I mean, you could see for Brad Pitt's character, he was smitten by her, but I don't think there was a lot of time given to that. It just almost seemed like, okay, well, this woman is doing this, I guess, philanthropy work or this and that, and he likes her, and this is like the first woman that he's been near in years. That's kind of the vibe I got from that. I did love the scene when Redford comes to the restaurant. That was a great scene. I mean, he just comes straight out and says what he feels to Elizabeth Hadley. And I thought it was going to be a little bit more cat and mouse, but he just gets straight to the point. And you kind of like that. You don't normally see that, he's just pulling her all out there. I know all about you. And at that point, I'm thinking, okay, well, he's kind of, what is he doing? Is he playing the protective father figure type to Brad Pitt? What is the premise? But of course, once again, it's like he's looking out for Brad Pitt, but how far is he going? Because Brad Pitt likes this woman. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but there could have been a little more time spent between the couple to really feel the impact of why it was so important that he gets to know her, and why he's maybe willing to risk everything he's learned for her.
Yeah, it did feel a bit like he was just trying to, I felt like Redford was basically trying to break them up because he didn't want Brad Pitt to say, hey, I can have a family and leave this life behind. I felt a little bit like Redford was saying, my first vibe was he's like, I'm going to break them up so that Brad Pitt doesn't have anything in his life, and the CIA is all he has. Because if he has her, then suddenly he's not going to be making the decisions the same way, and he's not going to be doing things the same way. if he has a wife back at home or a family of some kind was my vibe. And so I didn't know if I should be trusting. In fact, when he first started driving the wedge between them, I was actually shocked she admitted that she actually did do bad things. And I was like, oh, yeah, I thought Redford was just trying to get into Brad Pitt's head, but she is a bad person. Well, she did a bad thing.
She just blew up a building. A couple of people in there. Yeah. We all make mistakes.
I mean, Brad Pitt threw a chair from the rooftop.
What happens in Europe stays in Europe, guys. Come on.
Right?
Spies will be spies.
Right? You can get over that accent. I mean, she's got that British accent. I mean, this is lovely.
Come on.
Yeah.
So back in Beirut, they're planning to use the doctor to kill this guy. And they also meet up with a militia as a backup plan to just blow the building in case the doctor thing doesn't work. The doctor's on board, though, but they've got to wait 4 days to do it. And that gives Brad Pitt just enough time to tell his real name to Elizabeth Hadley. The day of the assassinations, bombings are happening all over. Now the doctor might not be able to make it to the target. So Brad Pitt pulls the doctor away from saving children to go kill somebody instead. And he races through the streets, making sure to go through a cart just to legitimize the chase scene. While this is happening, the militia decides to move into action anyways. And before the doctor can do his thing, the militia drives a bomb into the building and blows it up, killing everybody. Redford says it's still a success because they got the job done. Pitt says he doesn't want to live his life with success defined like that. And the two decide to go their separate ways. James, this was kind of the crux of the entire story, why Pitt wasn't working with the CIA anymore, why he was sort of going off on his own and doing his own thing, and why Redford is still with the CIA.
Yeah, it is. And I will say about this doctor, even though we don't have a lot of time spent with him, there was an emotional impact seeing this doctor. As I said, I think the way they got this doctor involved was something had happened to his parents and they had proof of it. They had some pictures and they're like, hey, without saying it to the audience, it's like, hey, this is how you can avenge your parents, the wrong that was done to your parents, right? So that doctor, even though we didn't spend a lot of time with him, Brad Pitt seemed to take to like a personal connection. You know, at one point that doctor asked him in the car when they were prepping him on how to kill the terrorist guy. He says, how is it when you kill someone? Like, is it, what does it do to you as a man? And Brad Pitt's basically telling him like, it's not easy. And it's a very kind of touching thing. But for him to they go through all that trouble, the whole fruit cart, you always have to have a fruit cart run into, right? This is chase scene 101, right?
Yeah, they delivered the cart, which was good.
They do. And the good thing about this is they don't even really even go through it. I think don't they just smash into it and it stops? And they got to go on foot from there. But when he sends the doctor into that building, what's coming as the militia's just racing that SUV full of explosives. And it was kind of gut wrenching to see that, because that you're not even thinking about the terrorists, you're thinking about that poor doctor. How he became a casualty of this war. And that was the tipping point for Brad Pitt. He's like, this is not the kind of work I want to do.
Yeah.
And
what does he say? He says it's like, this is a fucked up barometer for success or something.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Because Redford's just spewing off numbers. Oh, well, 75 kills, building blown up, one dead terrorist. It was all worth it, right? And I thought it was very meta. There were all these meta moments in this movie because Robert Redford and Brad Pitt. I mean, if you talk about their iconography of movie stars, they're very similar. The only difference is Brad Pitt is never. I don't think he's done any directing. I know Redford got into directing at one point, and I think that's where he got his Oscars, or at least one of them. Brad Pitt says, "I don't want to be like you." I don't want to end up like you, but it's kind of weird. It's like, well, you guys will, you will. I'm thinking as the actors, you guys are so much like each other, But at that point, that's when we're going to see where the arc of Robert Redford's character, because what is he? Is he kind of a guy that just thinks that human beings are expendable, like baseball cards? Is there any heart there? Is he just a company man, just get the job done by any means necessary? And we'll see kind of his redemption later on.
Yeah, and as we talk about this, I want to go back to the doctor real quick, because it's as I talk about it, it really sinks in. It wasn't just that an innocent guy, the doctor, died, but you think about the doctor was someone there doing good, saving lives and doing all these good things. And even on a one-to-one basis, you got rid of the terrorist, but you also got rid of this guy who was really helping people and really doing a good thing at the same time, which makes that loss even heavier, to be fair, than if it was just someone else there. Andy, I have a really serious question for you. Brad Pitt looking at settling down with one girl. Did James Bond have it wrong?
I mean, the real relationship, the real love story is between
Brad Pitt.
Well,
Yeah, Andy and Brad Pitt.
yeah. Oh, wow, guys.
Andy the viewer and
blushing.
Brad Pitt.
Yes.
This is true.
I'm jealous of what you guys have.
Right? We all are.
I mean, I'm stuck with Freddie Prinze Jr.
Oh, FPJ.
Yeah.
No, I think the real romance was between Brad Pitt and Robert Redford. Like, it feels like that's the relationship that's going through all these ups and downs. And I feel like after Brad Pitt does that line to him, like he doesn't want to be like him, that's a big breakup, and that's when we feel like they're breaking up. And it's tough, I think, with Redford, because in like the present scenes, you're really rooting for him in that room of all those kind of douchey CIA agents. But when he's with the scenes with Pitt, you kind of don't like him. Just like how you guys just said, he said this was a success, even though this doctor died. So it's a tough part to play, I think, because at the end of the day, I was a fan of Redford. There was never like a part where I was like, oh, that guy, he's like a charming older movie star. Maybe that was it. I'm like, he's Robert Redford. I trust him.
Going back to that room and going back to the CIA, Redford does a quick switcheroo to get the imagery files of the prison and swaps them with photos of the Bahamas. And during the scene, I was wondering how many lives that'll cost us down the road. But in any case, Redford is transferring all of his money to the Grand Cayman Islands, while the bad guy spy is finding out that they've all worked with Duncan in Hong Kong, who was the guy that gave Redford the heads up in the first place at the beginning of the movie. And now we're finding out that Hong Kong Herald, as they call him, hired Brad Pitt for something. What's going on? I don't know. I'm just going to keep on watching. But under Operation Dinner Out, Redford forges the CIA director's name and plans a 30-minute power outage at the prison and sends a note to Commander Wiley. He gives up his entire retirement to pay off the power guy who's enjoying Baywatch. Hey, what a catchy entrance theme that thing had, by the way. Some people stand in the darkness.
So into it.
I'll be there. I'll be
there. Yeah. But back in the Need to Know room, the villain spy is on to Redford and saying that Redford has been working against them the whole time. But Redford built a good alibi and made it look like he was just looking at real estate in the Bahamas. Redford then says Hadley went to jail because he traded her for another U.S. agent, and Pitt was simply trying to save her because of love. Wiley calls Redford and confirms Dinner Out is a go, and then Operation, as I would call it, America, fuck yeah, storms the prison during the blackout, and they save Pitt and Hadley as Redford drives off into the sunset, and the CIA realizes they've been duped and now have to deal with the incident in China. Andy, we see everything come to fruition. Brad Pitt, Elizabeth Hadley, I should say Tom Bishop. Come on, I call him Brad Pitt throughout this whole movie.
They do have cool names though, Bishop and Muir.
Yeah. They do have very cool names, but everything kind of wraps up here. What are your thoughts? And they save the day.
Yeah, I really think they did a great job of this final act. Like, I'm on board for all of it. They kind of wrap it up pretty well. Like, I feel like throughout the movie, I was kind of like, I was paying attention the whole time, but there's kind of some stuff I was a little thrown off at and wondering how it would all come together. And I felt like this part of the movie really does kind of bring it all home. I do like, we were talking about how Redford keeps outsmarting the CIA room. And I love how his big thing is, I left my smokes. Forgot my smokes, so he's got to like go back the guy's like, I'll get him for you, and that's like his big move. I'm like, these guys are so dumb.
Right. Let me walk away and not glance back at all. And
So great.
Let me turn my back. I feel like he's like, oop, one of the cigarettes fell out. Let me bend over and pick it up. Like, all this stuff keeps happening to keep his back turned.
So great. He
took a whole file and put it in his coat, and the cut is not quick enough where it looks like he's putting something in his coat. The guy doesn't even notice. It's like, come on.
How do you put a whole file in your coat and not let it just like fall?
Yeah, he doesn't even like button the coat. Think about it. If you're putting a file, like, oh, you got to at least button it up or something. I don't know. These
Unless
guys,
he has some Velcro in there we didn't know about. And so that part made me laugh. But the part that made me laugh the most out of this whole movie was the Baywatch scene, like you were just talking about. It was just so. I don't know what the point of it was.
I feel like they showed the whole entrance too.
Let me get this straight. The grid guy, they're throwing all this money at him. It's like $282,000. And but the only reason he agrees is because the dude's standing in front of the TV so he could finish seeing, Pamela Anderson bounce up and down, which, I mean, I get it. He's like, okay, I'll do it, just so you can get moved from the TV. I was like, come on.
You're like,
I mean,
hey,
Baywatch was huge, by the way. I think we forget how big that, like, a lot of people forget how big that show was.
It was a huge 90s. International show too, supposedly.
Yeah.
Right. I know it was big in Germany and all.
Yeah, Hasselhoff didn't Hasselhoff knock down the Berlin Wall?
Yeah, personally, he was the guy that did it.
Like, he literally himself with his shirt off, right?
James, this whole movie comes together, and I guess the quote unquote good guys win. How did you feel it kind of wrapped up here?
Yeah, I thought it was, I mean, unlike you, Andy, I actually was a little more confused those last 20 minutes. I was like, okay, wait a second. He forged the director, but then the director walks in, no one's following up. But I mean, this is definitely early 90s because they're using all this suspense from like a fax, a fax machine.
That was funny. Yeah. Did you get my fax?
I will say this. Some of the impact from not seeing, it was great seeing Brad Pitt in the flashbacks, but all the kind of present stuff when he's getting his buttocks whipped, he's being tortured. I don't really feel that for some reason. I didn't really feel the torture, and I don't know why, because I do care about the character in the flashbacks, but because the torture is kind of so disjointed from the rest of the film. I mean, it was great to see him finally get rescued, but I was never like really feared for him because we didn't really see a lot of torture. We would just cut to him, for 30-second increments.
And didn't it seem like the same shot too? It was like the same shot of him getting, and not that I wanted him to get more tortured, but it kind of like you're kind of forgot. He's really.
And they're not using difference though. They just sending some guy in there just beating his face up, but there's no nail pulling, there's no waterboarding, there's no tickling.
Tickling is what they should have started with. So I gotta say, I started this by saying I like this movie, but I realized why I forgot it, and it's because I think I'm with James. I think the ending felt really flat. I think from a presentation in a movie theater standpoint, it played out well. But one of those, when you think about it for a second, first off, Robert Redford retires with nothing. He has no money. What's he doing for a living at this point?
He's got that Porsche.
Hadley should have been in jail. She bombed an embassy and killed a lot of innocent people. She should be in jail. That didn't really sit well with me. Also, I didn't like the idea that Brad Pitt's whole thing is he doesn't want a lot of innocent people to die over one person so they can call it a win. But what's going to happen now that there's been a huge international incident in China because of what just happened to save each other? So he's kind of being a hypocrite to himself here. But also, I think the biggest thing for me was that this whole movie felt like it was set up under the premise that there was someone working someone else or someone using someone as an asset, but there really wasn't. It was a pretty cut and dry. No one was using anybody the whole time. I expected there to be some twist at the end, but there really wasn't. It was just, it felt like the whole story really played out it's played at the very end when he said, okay, I'm going to send this letter to Commander Wiley and pay off this dude. That was really all that was. Everything before that didn't really matter. And it made me think too, because he's not friends with anyone that he works with. He seems a little bitter about the way things work in the United States. I don't know why Redford or Pitt were spies. It never really said like what they like about the job. It seemed like they were working jobs. And they just like, oh, I started here after high school, and before you know it, you're retiring. Yeah. Like that's how they felt about it.
And it's funny, Jack, that you mentioned the ending. How what does Redford end up with? Because in my head, I'm like, oh wow, this is kind of like Usual Suspects, like he gets out of there before they realize that he was the one that like did this Operation Dinner Out, and then he's just cruising in his Porsche. I'm like, ah, man, what a life he's got to live. He's retired. He's got his Porsche. Tons of money in the bank, and then I'm
don't
like,
they know where he lives? Like they're
Yeah.
coming after him. I'm sure what he did was not legal.
I mean, it's like a war crime at some point, isn't it? He invaded foreign soil for personal reasons.
Cut to the post-credit scene. It's him pulling into his driveway, surrounded by
weapons, SWAT. Because what are they gonna do? They're gonna be like, "Oh, well, that old Redford, he got us again." Well,
Yeah,
good for him.
that rascal. One more time.
Yeah,
the SWAT team. The SWAT team is surrounding him. He's like, "Hold on, guys, I got to get my cigarettes. They're in the house." The whole SWAT team goes in there and he blows it up.
Every one of them goes in there. But also to the point of the CIA guys, and before we wrap up, the CIA guys being idiots, I was thinking too, by the way, this is Redford's last day, but why is everyone acting like they've never worked with him before? Like, I feel like they'd be like, Redford, come on, man. You always tell these long stories. Just get to the point. I've been working for 30 years. I know what you're doing. Just tell me where he is. And but they were all like, "Oh, interesting. He's telling a story." Oh, okay. Because they were in there for 24 hours. By the way, it wasn't like it was just a quick 30-minute meeting. They were there all day. At some point, we'd be like, "Guys, we need to wrap this up. Let's hurry." Mm-hmm. Speaking of wrapping up, though, I think that does it for us. Any final words or any final thoughts on the movie?
For me, just disappointed they weren't father and son, but excited that I can watch this with my dad.
Overall, I give it a positive review. Like I said, it's any kind of flat, but it was a fun watch.
Yeah, it's an easy watch. Easy watch. Like I said, some you watch with your dad on TNT or AMC. Let's say 20, 30 years from now, you'd be watching it on TCM.
And saying to yourself, I don't think I've seen this.
Yeah.
I think I saw the trailer 20 years ago.
Yeah. You'd be saying this to your own son.
We're going to review this movie next year on this show. Yeah. Well, before we get into next week's movies, Andy, do you have a Kevin Bacon for us?
Oh, yeah, of course. So you guys know that I can go easy. I could go the easy route and do Brad Pitt, Sleepers, Bacon. But I know you don't want that. Our viewers are like, Andy, you could do better than that.
I would love if you somehow looped around back to Sleepers anyways. With a different actor.
Well, I'm gonna do you a little better here. So we're gonna start with Robert Redford. Robert Redford was in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with Paul Newman.
Great movie.
Paul Newman was in Road to Perdition with Tom Hanks.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Hanks was in Apollo 13 with Kevin Bacon.
Attaboy.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that one. That was a good 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Nice. I feel like the fact that, the Sleepers thing is hilarious to me, but it's so funny how it's so easy. Well, you're the one that does the work, but it seems like it's so easy to just match people up with Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. Well, Sleepers, you got Pitt and De Niro, and they've both done so many movies. Yeah. So that's why.
Yeah, that's it. Like I said, 6 degrees of Sleeper should be the thing. But
that's great.
But that does it for this one. Andy, next week we go to the year 2002, and what movie are we going to chat about?
Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man.
Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man. One of the movies. If Blade was the Friendster of superhero movies, X-Men was the MySpace, and I guess this would be the Facebook of superhero movies, the ones that made it seem like, yep, superhero movies are here to stay. They're blockbusters. They're going to be around for a long time, which I guess would make Iron Man the Twitter. I don't know how this works. The Instagram, who knows? But then after that, the following week for our listeners, if you want to keep up with the movies, James, we go to 2003. What do we do in 2003?
We're going good old Frank the Tank, ladies and gentlemen. Frank the Tank, old school.
I love it.
Yeah.
Old school.
Love that movie.
That is perfect because it's about dudes going back to school. And I think we got to show both ends of the spectrum there. So for 2002, we're going to see what it's like for girls in school. We're going to watch the classic Mean Girls for 2004.
Oh, nice.
So if you want to keep up with the show and watch along with us, next week, 2002 Spider-Man, then 2003's Old School, and then 2004's Mean Girls. I'm excited for this run of movies. I think it's going to be a good time. Andy, where can the world find you online?
You can find me at Just Andy Rossi.
And James Shippey.
At JShippy2 on Twitter and at JEShippy2 on the IG.
And you can find me at Real Jack Farmer across all social media. This has been the Evolution of Movies show. Please leave us a like, a comment, and subscribe. Tell us what movies you would like to see us review in the comments. And we will see you next year.